Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Off the Shelf, a presentation by Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter, where our own Dawn Gepfer interviews an author and tries to move their books off the shelf and into the hands of readers. Our guest this morning is Sarah K. Stevens. She's the author of 7 novels and is a developmental psychologist at Penn State University. The fall and spring find her in the classroom, but she writes year round. And she has had her writings appear in LitHub, the Writer's Chronicle, Hazlitt, The Millions, and her books are psychological thrillers. Surprise. Spoiler alert, whatever. And she uses that psychological training to craft darkly human stories with killer twists. She lives in central Pennsylvania with her children and husband, enjoying the country life. And now, Dawn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lance, and welcome everybody. We so appreciate you being here, and we are looking forward to having a chat with Sarah K. Stevens. One of the things that we really appreciate is if our audience engages with us during this conversation. Although I have a lot of questions for Sarah, we do want to know what it is that you would like to know about her writing, about her path to publishing. So please, if you would, you can use the chat to put a question in and we will ask it on your behalf, or raise your hand and we will call on you and you can ask her directly. This is really supposed to be an opportunity for us all to chat with Sarah. So if you hear noises in my background, I apologize. My dog is shredding paper. It's a thing he does when I'm on a call. For some reason, it's like, the psychologist could tell us. It's something behavioral.
I'm going to analyze your dog afterwards, Dawn, okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I have been looking forward to this.
I am glad. I've been looking forward to it too. As we were chatting prior to the program beginning, and this has been on the books for months, probably since the beginning of the year. So patiently waiting to get to this date. And I probably drove you a little crazy checking in with you and saying, is it still good? Is July still
not
good
at all.
for you?
Not at all. I appreciated the reminders, and it just gave the anticipation even more to get to talk to everybody about my crazy stories.
Well, I love
so much fun writing.
I love your crazy stories. So before we get there, though, I always like to start off these conversations asking our authors to tell us a little bit about themselves more in depth than what we can read about you in your bio. And to me, like, let's just go back to the beginning. Tell us about your childhood.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, kind of a rural suburb of that, just south of Cleveland. So I grew up in the country with my 2 brothers and my parents, and spent a lot of time outside. We had a lot of books growing up, and I was very lucky in our public school system. They had an accelerated English program that started in early elementary school. And so I was part of this program from when I was very young, and I had the same English teacher for probably 6 or 7 years. Her name was Mrs. Lippiott, and she was this really important teacher in my life, just encouraging me as a writer and a reader. And I think I go back through my entire life, and there are so many teachers, both formal and informal, who have played a big role in me just loving language, loving good stories, and feeling confident enough to put my stories out there. Because all of us who are writers know it's a really vulnerable thing to put your writing out there for other people to critique. And so a lot of that goes back to my early experiences with wonderful teachers, with really loving and supportive parents. And in the psychology field, we talk about this element of praising effort over ability. It comes from some really important literature. So instead of telling your kids you're really smart, they talk about, oh, you worked really hard towards that. And my parents really embodied that and always encouraged me to keep working hard at things that I found difficult. And they were like, you could do it, you could do it, keep doing it. And I think that perseverance is really required a lot as a writer. And I see that embodied in my day-to-day life.
So you mentioned your teacher, Miss Lippiett.
Mrs. Lippiett, yes.
Yeah. Does she know that you still praise her and you
I don't know. And it's something where, you lose touch. And in the day of social media, she strikes me as someone who likely would not have been on social media. And now that I'm in my 40s, and she was an older teacher when I had her, I'm not sure if she's actually maybe still, if she's, alive or not. So that's a good question. I do hope that in the universe, she knows that how much of a role she played. And if you go into my author acknowledgments, and this is something that as a reader, I love reading acknowledgments from authors. I often read it before I start the book just to get a sense of the author. I often, will thank different teachers in my life because, like I said, I've had a lot of really wonderful teachers.
Yeah, it sounds, I love that. And I have some favorite teachers as well. And not that long ago, I just decided I had an older teacher when I was in elementary school, and I thought, I wonder, how she is or where she is, and to your point, her being older, she's no longer with us, and it actually really made me very sad because I always remembered her, and you lose touch, and I never, got back with her and let her know that she did have a significant impact on me. So now we know about your childhood, and somewhere along the way in your path of early life, you ended up studying psychology. So how did that come about?
Oh gosh, let me tell you this origin story. Okay. It starts with a book. So in middle school and early high school, I really wanted to be an archaeologist and I wanted to be an Egyptologist in particular. And I was growing up in the 90s, and so Tutankhamun's, like the remains of his tomb were like touring around. It was like a big cultural thing. So I was really into that. And then I came into my freshman year of high school, and one of the required books that we read over the summer was A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which is a classic dystopian novel. And that really got me intrigued about society and psychology. And that's the book that really started it and made me think, oh, maybe I should be a psychologist. And it's expanded from there. And obviously, the work I do as a developmental psychologist is very much focusing on health and adjustment and not on dystopian elements. But that's the kind of origin point of my interest in human development.
And so you decided to study that
Mhm.
in college.
I
Okay.
did, yeah.
Yeah. So where'd you go to college and
So I
all
went,
that good
like, I
stuff?
earned my bachelor's from Youngstown State University in Ohio, which was a great undergraduate experience. I had the most wonderful teachers. It's a smaller state school. And now being a professor at Penn State, I recognize just how different my academic experience was as an undergrad. Just because my classes were smaller, all my professors knew me by name, and it was just wonderful training. And then my husband and I, who we were just engaged at the time, came to Penn State for our graduate work. He's an engineer, and I was studying developmental psychology. So I earned my doctorate there, and then I ended up teaching for many years, almost 20 years, in the department in human development and family studies. And I've only recently come back over as a teaching faculty, a teaching professor in psychology. So I kind of came to Happy Valley, which is what we call State College, the town that Penn State is in, and I never left.
So, when you were first studying psychology, what was your career plan at that time? What
hmm
were you thinking you were
So,
going to do?
yeah, when I first started psychology, so I should mention when I was an undergraduate and even in graduate school, language was always a big part of my life. Writing was a big part of my life. And I did an English minor and a stat minor when I was an undergrad. So it's like the two ends of my like right brain
Wow.
and left brain. Um, but when you got into graduate school, so much is focused on scientific writing, which is very different from creative writing. And so I ended up doing just a lot more just enjoyable reading, and reading fiction rather than writing. Um, And within my developmental psychology trajectory, I started out studying peer relationships in teenagers, which we have a saying in the field of psychology that research is me search, which is that as a psychologist, you tend to study that which you struggle with.
Mhm.
And I didn't necessarily struggle with making friends as a teenager. I had a good friendship circle, but it was a time in my life where there was just a lot of we call it relational aggression, like where girls are mean to each other in certain ways. And that really, it affected me, but it also fascinated me. So I ended up studying that as, a developmental psychologist in my graduate work. And then I had the opportunity to do some teaching as a graduate student. And big surprise that, I had these wonderful teachers in my life. My mother's a retired high school science teacher, so education has always been a big part of me, and I loved teaching so much. So instead of going the full tenure track route and doing research and teaching and service, I focused primarily on teaching, and it has been the most rewarding career that I could imagine. I was just getting my syllabi ready for fall semester. We have about a month before the semester starts. And I was getting it ready. I put a few things on social media. I'm connected with a lot of my students and former students on my Instagram, and they are all like hearting my little post or my story. And they're like, "We miss you, Dr. Colette." Oh, and I'm like, "I miss you too. I can't wait to see you and talk about how to make the world a happier, healthier place."
I love that. A happier, healthier place.
Mhm.
And I typically don't segue right into writing right away, but I've got to with that because your stories are psychological
Oh,
thrillers.
they're not happy or healthy at all.
Which is kind of why I said, well, whoa, let's just go ahead and jump on in over there. Um, let's really like start with the first, but you've written seven.
Mhm.
And you were part of a anthology?
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
So a good writing friend of mine, Brian Centrone, has different anthologies that his publishing group publishes. And so it was part of the First Came Fear. So, I wrote a scary story for that, which was fun. And it's interesting. You go through all my books, and there's certain trends that arise. And I think as thriller writers, who honestly are the nicest people you will ever meet, I imagine you've had that experience yourselves. Like we write all this very dark fiction, and yet in our lives, we're really happy people. And I think it's because there's a sense of catharsis you come to from writing about your fears and writing about what scares you and writing about maybe what you struggle with. And I think that's what I find in my own writing is, what am I really struggling with? What am I fearful of in my own life? Let me write about it and have total control over it as an author. And that allows me to kind of face that fear. So you see a lot of different trends in my books related to the role of mothers, the role of uh, subordination of women, this kind of fear of losing touch with reality, these kind of core, I think, concerns that affect all of us, but I also see come up in my own life about being worried about, am I being a good enough mother? Am I being a good enough spouse? Am I being a good enough person? And I can write about those things in my stories in a way that helps me deal with that.
That I think that's very interesting. And I'm curious um, about do other psychological thriller writers, obviously they don't necessarily have your background, but where like are they looking at it from such a humane perspective? And I was pondering this before, is that I feel like when I think of a psychological thriller, I'm expecting um maniacal villain who has some dark agenda and maybe a revenge or gaslighting, like it's not this unraveling more so where I got the impression from reading about A Flash of Red, which was your first book, that really was maybe more of a unraveling with some people in a family unit.
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was my first, foray into like full novel writing. Um, and I think I've grown a lot as a writer from that point. But, it was kind of figuring out, can I tell a story over a long period of time and have everything connect together? And it's interesting because I just finished the draft of my next novel. It's called I'll Smile More When You're Dead. It's a feminist thriller. It's a play on how women get told often to smile more in their lives.
Hmm.
It's like, well, here, I'll do that. But
I'm
um,
already adding it to my to be read list.
I appreciate that. But I just sent it out to my beta readers, and I was telling them, they asked what kind of feedback do I want? And I have a lot of really wonderful trusted beta readers. And I'm like, just like last time, I want to make sure the plot holds together. I want to make sure all these different pieces come together in a satisfying ending. And when you're writing a thriller, there's character development, certainly, but there's also so much of it is plot driven. And your reader wants to be surprised and they want to have unexpected things happening. That's the fun of it. And so you have to make sure that you lay down the pathway in a way that is both makes sense in the end, but is unpredictable when they're first encountering it. And that's the challenge, I think, with writing thrillers, is to have the plot be satisfying in the end and yet unpredictable up to that point. And for anyone who's read my novels, it's what I often will say is when I'm writing my books, I'm writing and writing and writing. I'm like, okay, is it off the rails yet? It's not off the rails yet. Keep going, Sarah. So get it off the rails. So that's kind of how my plots go. It's just you crank it up to 11, like let's just make it really wild and fun and
Mhm.
surprising. But in the end, everything connects back together.
So when you decide to go off the rails with a story, at some point, do you say, okay, after let's say you get it all out there and then you're like, okay, I've thrown everything I can think of at it. Do you then go back and tone it down and say, okay, let's rein this in? Or do you like, let's go for it?
So in some books, I have toned it down based on editorial feedback. And in others, I'm like, no, no, this is what makes it fun. And the thing is that I think literature and books are so subjective, right? And my books may not be the right fit for someone who likes a cozier kind of thriller or one where there's kind of like a really happy ending. My endings are often, I hope, satisfying, but not necessarily. They're more bittersweet.
Mm,
And I don't know. I won't put a book out there unless I'm really proud of what I've done. And if it doesn't suit everybody, that's the beauty of literature is that there's so many different kinds for so many different readers.
agreed. And so we kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but so let's bring it back. So you're teaching, you've started a family
Oh,
and
not started. Our kids are all grown and flown
well,
gone. Like, please, we are empty nesters and we are loving it.
I'm almost there. I'm almost there. But going back to a flash of red.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're relatively like within your first 10 years of teaching and you decide to write this book. How did
That's
that come about and how did you work it into your life?
So that's a great question. And I think with writers, it's so much of it is just figuring out your writing schedule or how it's going to work into your life and creating a routine. Um, And so for me, I was able to approach writing again once my children were older. So by older, I mean that they were in like middle school at that point or high school. So they didn't need me as much. And as a result, I found myself having a bit more free time. With my career as a teaching professor, I have certain times where I have to be really on point. So I have to be ready for my lectures. I have to be in the classroom. But then I also have a great deal of flexibility as well with when I am working and preparing my materials. And so that allows me to integrate in different pieces to my schedule. So what I like to do is, if it's not a teaching day for me, I might take a bit of the morning and work a little bit on this novel idea that I have. And then because I'm on an academic schedule, once my kids came along, I did not teach in the summertime anymore. So I have my summers to, myself as much as you do as a parent when my children were younger. And now my summers are writing and gardening, and I'm a volunteer firefighter, so that's another part of it. Which is a lot of fun. And I'm amazed that I got this far into my conversation without mentioning that. My husband teases me that within the first 5 minutes of meeting anybody, I'm like, by the way, I'm a volunteer firefighter. But it's a great joy of my life too. But basically, I set aside time and I'm like, this is my writing time. I like to do it in the morning because otherwise the rest of your day gets away from you. And what happened with The Flash of Red, and what happens really with all of my novels, is I'm doing other things in my life. I'm walking my dog, I'm running on the treadmill, I'm, working around the house in the garden or cooking dinner, and different ideas pop into my head. And I think that's part of just being human, but especially being a psychologist and being an avid reader, I've always got ideas swirling about, oh, wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be interesting? And I just felt brave enough at that point, and I had enough mental bandwidth because my kids were older to start writing down these little vignettes and making it into a story. Prior to that, I had dabbled a bit in writing some short stories, but I had never had the gumption to try and write a full-length novel. And now on my seventh, I feel like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this. But even still, it's so exciting when an idea comes and you're trying to work through it. And for me, I try to be an outliner, but again, the off the rails mentality means my stories often evolve as I'm writing them. And that's a really fun experience for me.
Yeah, we hear that. We do hear that a lot when we talk with our authors, that it's almost as if they're being told what to write and where to
True. It
take it.
sounds psychotic, right? But it's like, no, it's truly this kind of creative synergy. I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, I love it. And I'm wondering, so with A Flash of Red,
Mhm.
did you just feel compelled to tell the story that was forming in your head, or were you more looking for a creative outlet that became this novel?
I think it was a matter of having like a creative outlet. Having the story. And also, I'm the kind of person who likes challenges. I like to have goals. And, it was something where I was like, okay, can I do this? Can I, work towards this long-term goal and really make a story out of it? So it's always if you go through my catalog of my books, you can kind of see, oh, what was Sarah, thinking about then, or what was she dealing with then? Um, I like spending time with my characters, obviously, even if they're darker or struggling or what have you. And I think about my one book, Isolation. I wrote that every author of this time period has their COVID book or their COVID books, right? So Isolation was my first novel I wrote during lockdown. And if you go into that book, it's set in this like beautiful mansion, and yeah, they're dealing with a pandemic. But there's a lot of chapters where one of the characters is caring for the horses at this mansion. And you could just kind of get a sense like, oh, Sarah's having a hard day, so she's going to write a horse chapter today. I just wanted to spend time with this gentle man caring for his horses on this mansion where everything's going amiss. And then the book after that is called The Good Life. And it's set, again, I wrote it later on in the lockdown during the pandemic. And it's set in Costa Rica in this luxury tropical resort. And you can kind of think like, oh, Sarah wishes she could go somewhere warm and beautiful and just bask on the beach, even though all this like, craziness breaks out. So I do think our novels are little bits of escapism for us too.
And so you're writing a book, and it sounds like it was a creative outlet, but at the same time you were challenging yourself to like, hey, let's take it from beginning to end. And were you intending to publish it or just finish it?
Oh, please. So here's the naivete of any new author, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to finish it. And then I'm like, oh, well, this is the best thing ever written. These agents are going to be banging down my door. And anyone who's gone through the querying process knows it is a hellscape. Oh my gosh. Like you could have the most fantastic book, and it's just so much more than just having it be a good story. It's marketing and the book market and just having it land in the right agents, inbox and have the right tagline and whatnot. So, I thought for certain, oh yeah, it's gonna get snapped up. And nowadays, I have a much more realistic viewpoint of it, and essentially the way I think of it is, it would just be, when I write a story that I think is high quality, and that's the only kind I'm going to ever publish. I just want readers to have access to it and I want them to enjoy it. And that can be a little bit of the frustration of having such an overfilled. I mean, it's wonderful that there are so many great books out there for readers, but at the same time, as a writer, it's so much harder than to make any sort of, I don't know, impression on the market. I know there are readers out there who would probably really enjoy my books, but, I can't necessarily get the attention of them because there's so much else out there.
There is a lot out there. And as a matter of fact, that's how I found Sisters in Crime. I went to a bookstore and I went on Amazon and I was like, I need a new mystery in my life. And I was overwhelmed in those situations. And as Big Brother will do, I was online and this ad popped up and said, you might be interested in Sisters in Crime Atlanta. And I was like, what is that?
Ooh.
And my drive was trying to find new, not the mainstream authors. And that's also what we like about Off the Shelf is we like to find authors that and get the word out there, about them and
It
introduce
means so
readers.
much to us as independent authors. It's such a huge help. I mean, I can't even describe it. Because really, we write our books because we want them to be enjoyed. And so all of the effort of bloggers and book clubs and everything is so much appreciated.
Well, we are happy to help, and we're glad you're here. So, you kind of alluded to this, that once you wrote the book, that maybe the path to publishing wasn't as easy, and then the other side of it is once you get it published, yay, but then you have to market it. So, can
Mhm.
you talk to us a little bit about that process, finishing, getting it to the publisher?
Absolutely. So for me, my very first book of Flasherette is currently out of print. And I'm kind of okay with that because although I was proud of it at the time, I feel like my craft as a storyteller has really improved a lot. So I often start with my first book that was published with Bloodhound Books, which is a very well-established independent publishing. They do a lot of digital genre fiction, and they're based in the UK. My very first book, A Flash of Red, was published with Panda Moon Publishing, which is no longer existent. And I was kind of, when I got the offer, I was just so thrilled. And I kind of realized through the process that, oh, hang on, I think this is more of like a vanity press. It was the way it was operating. And, they would put the book out, but you as the author were expected to do all of the marketing and whatnot. And it was something that I just didn't have the funds nor the time to do at that point in my life. And then I was able to, with my second book, It Was Always You, I went through the querying process again, and I was able to get a contract with Bloodhound Books and had a really good experience with them for several of my books. And by good experience, I mean excellent editors they put me with. They created the covers. I had all sorts of insight into the covers. Really, I think, fair contracts. And then they did all the marketing, which is really what I needed for myself at that time, again, time-wise and financially. And then with my last book, The Girl in the Fire, which is a little on the point because all my books now, since I've become a firefighter, have fire in them, and this one has it even in the title. But I can't help it. Um, with my latest book, I decided to self-publish because Bloodhound had been bought by a much larger publishing firm. And so the marketing for the books had kind of gone to the side a bit. So I'm like, okay, let me try it again. I'm more established in my career and as an author. And it was a really fun experience working and having a graphic designer create the cover, hiring an editor who I'd worked with before through Bloodhound to do the full edits. But once again, it comes down to marketing. And for me, it's just a point in my life where I cannot be throwing a ton of money at the marketing. And so you do more kind of grassroots efforts. But as a result, it kind of, your book doesn't get out there as much as you wish it would. So with this next book, I'm going to go back to the querying process, which if anyone, I imagine your authors have spoken about it before, but you craft, it's basically like a blurb about your book. And you go on, and there's all sorts of agents and different publishing firms that are currently accepting queries, is what they call it. And so you craft your query, which is a tagline, mentioning why you think your book would be a good fit for what they're looking for, the blurb or brief summary of your book, and then you send them however many chapters they want to see. And then you wait and you wait and you wait. And then you make an Excel spreadsheet because you sent it to hundreds of agents. And you keep track of it that way. And you hope that one of them hits. And I think for most authors who are established now, they'll talk to you about the same experience of trying to get, going through those numerous amounts of querying and tons of rejections until you get the one acceptance that starts your career in earnest.
So what was the time difference between A Flash of Red and It Was Always You? How many years or months in between?
So I would say it was about, I'm usually writing a book a year.
Uh-huh.
And again, I'm privileged because I have that time in the summer. Um, I'm a little bit behind because I was doing a lot of the marketing for The Girl in the Fire. So it might be 2 years now and before I start my next book after this one that I'm just finishing the edits on. So it was about a year, from publishing Flash of Red to when I had It Was Always You ready to go. And at that point, I knew that I was going to look for something different from the publisher I had worked with previously. And so that's where I started the querying process again. And of course, I had some experience under my belt. And so much of this is like in any career or any specific field, it's just kind of understanding what are the norms and what's the kind of general pathway? What are the good resources for you too? And what I found is that social media is such a wonderful place to meet other authors. And like I said, thriller authors are incredibly generous and kind. And you support them and they support you. And it's a very wonderful community. So I also was utilizing that a lot.
Are you part of writing organizations or like Sisters in Crime? Are you involved in any of those?
I am. I'm like part of the Crime Writers Association. And in part I did that. It's based in the UK because so many of my books, were through a UK digital publisher. Um, and then there's, I think, Society of Authors is another one. That's more so like legal support and advice for authors, which I think they do really excellent work. And they've helped me a few times looking at different contract elements that I wanted feedback on. So you pay your membership and you get essentially, legal advice and other resources for authors. So I highly recommend looking at the Society of Authors. But aside from those, it's more so kind of, again, I suppose book clubs of people that I know, book clubs online, authors that I really admire. And to my knowledge, here in little central Pennsylvania, we don't have anything as cool as Sisters in Crime here, like you guys do. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Well, I will say this, we most of our meetings are also they're hybrid. So you can join our chapter and join us on the second Saturday of every month from
Awesome.
your
This is great
home,
to
from the
know.
comfort of your home in central Pennsylvania.
That sounds great.
We would love to have you. Okay, so I had picked up on the fact that you were pretty consistent in your writing, but yet I thought there was a gap between A Flash of Red and It Was Always You, and so that's why I was kind of curious
I think it
if
must have been, yeah, it must have been because just looking for a new publisher, I think, 'cause
Mhm.
I had the
Okay.
manuscript ready to go. And as with a lot of authors, I have also quite a few other manuscripts that just are kind of hanging around in my drawer that maybe I'll go and edit again at some point.
Oh, I like to hear that because sometimes authors say, "Oh, there's one in the drawer and it ain't coming out ever." So I like the fact that you have not given up completely on
Remember, off the rails. So like, and I
yeah.
always tell my friends, like anything can be fixed in edits, right? So just get it on the page. And then from there, it's, you can fix it down the road. Don't let your self-critic prevent you from getting the words out.
Agreed. So one of Sharon made reference in the chat, and this is a point I probably should have mentioned instead of pitching us at Sisters in Crime Atlanta. Sisters in Crime is a national organization, and so and there's great benefits to it, on a national level as well.
Wonderful.
And I don't know if Tanisha did this or Lance, but somebody put the Pennsylvania chat.
I
Tanisha.
see that. Okay, I'm gonna have to check this out now for my fellow PA crime
Yeah.
lovers.
And you can always start your own chapter in central Pennsylvania. Look,
This,
I'm
this
just
is
saying.
this is
I'm just
true.
saying.
This
So,
is true.
so how would you say that because you have two careers going, okay? And I'm curious, how do these two careers cohabitate with one another?
Okay, let me tell you. So, as a developmental psychologist, the courses that I teach, the research that I focus on providing, and distilling to my students is all about how families, infants, children, adolescents, and even young adults, we go that whole spectrum for my specialty. How can we use developmental science to improve their health and adjustment? It's all about making our lives better, using science to understand how can we support families, how we can support young children to reach their full potential. So it's all about healthy elements. And then in my books, it's all about people behaving badly. So it's two sides of the same coin. Because obviously, as a psychologist, I think there's always this intrigue about the darker pieces of humanity. And also the fact that as human beings, we're incredibly complex and we have all sorts of wonderful parts of who we are. But each of us houses certain fears or desires that maybe are not as societally appropriate. And we learn to control them. A big part of being a human being, I often tell my students, like, one of our the two lifelong journeys and skills that we're going to work on our entire lives is learning to control our emotions and learning to take the perspective of others. Those are lifelong skills that take a really long time to develop. And even in my 40s, I feel like I get a little bit better each day, hopefully, at both of those. And oftentimes, when you look at breakdowns in a person's life, psychological breakdowns, there's certain neurochemical elements, certainly, but they often will be exhibited through things like a lack of empathy or through a lack of being able to control our uncomfortable emotions. Um, and so I like exploring that side of the human experience in my books. What happens when you can't control your impulses, or what happens when the people that are close to you are no longer taking good care of you, or you're not taking good care of them. What happens when those roles break down?
What I really like that I'm hearing, Sarah, is that you and I was trying to say this before, but I don't think I was doing a very good job of it, is that typically when you think of a psychological thriller, you think of something like really, really evil, dark, manipulative, and that sort of thing. And yet again, I get the sense, and this I think has to do with who you are professionally and your course of study. You take the humane side of it and you make it very relatable,
Mm.
and that we can see ourselves in these situations, like, oh, how would I react if this happened to me, and I think that one of the things in your bio that really struck me was the comment about using your psychological training to craft darkly human stories. And that's what really struck me,
Oh,
was the person side of it. So I'm really amazed, honestly. And talking to you more and more, um, I'm sensing that I was right in picking up on that it's not just a slasher. It's not a
no.
slasher stalking people. This is someone that something happened to and their reaction, and then like a domino effect to it. That,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. That's such a nice compliment to you
Oh.
for you to provide to me. I mean, that means a lot because, crafting characters, you want them to be fully imagined. And that's, no criticism to the genres where the characters are, like there's the serial killer genre or like, those kinds of books absolutely can be they're, great for people who enjoy that type of literature. For me, though, like you said, I'm more interested in looking at how someone who is quote unquote normal can have certain pieces of their life break down. And that's a very human thing. And I think in my books, it's just that that breakdown happens maybe a bit more swiftly and a bit more extremely. And that's what makes it perhaps a good thriller. But each of us has so many complexities to us. And the one thing that I've learned in my developmental training is that, we are each of us a product of the experiences in our life. I think that's something that all of us understand as human beings. But also recognizing that who I am is very much in large part due to the early environments that were created for me, the way the people, the adults around me were able to care for me or not care for me. And so when we look at an individual as an adult who has great struggles, um, I'm not interested in assigning any sort of blame. It's more about understanding, if I had been in the same circumstances as that person, I probably would have developed the same kinds of difficulties. And again, my students and I often talk about it, like if we're dealing with parents who are not able to care for their children appropriately or they have addiction issues, I often remind them, like, you're not there to judge the parent. You don't know what they've gone through. You're there to help them, and you're there to help give them the skills they need in order to do what they need to do to care for their child in a safe way. So that idea of judging human beings, I think we're really quick to do it, and it's a very easy thing to do, but the more humane piece of it is to try and understand what brought you to that place. And I may be in the same place if I had done and experienced what you had.
Mhm. Yes. And I'm curious now because I would imagine that there is an assumption that these ideas that come to you are um, they come to you through your professional
Hmm.
experiences. And then you just elaborate on them and change things around and go twisty and all that. So that's probably an obvious question, but I like the idea of asking you instead of saying, how does your career impact your writing? I'd like to ask it the other way.
Hmm.
How has your writing impacted your teaching career?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Whoo. What a good question. How does my writing impact my teaching? Hmm. I have to pause and think for a second, because you're right, Dawn. So often I think of it in the inverse. How my training impacts the way I handle my characters, right? Oh, goodness gracious. You know what? I do think if we go back into my catalog of books, sometimes I get an idea and it makes me start to think about, okay, I need to look into this more from a scientific perspective. So, for example, the book that I just finished, there's certain elements of epigenetics and trauma and the impact of trauma on your physical health and your mental health. And that's something that I'd encountered peripherally in my career, certainly as a psychologist. But when I got the idea for this book, um, and just to give you a little bit of not a spoiler alert, but it's looking at, a group of women who, have a certain ability when they are together and maybe sometimes apart that they can manipulate their environment to their benefit, and they utilize this um, to address certain men in their life who are maybe mistreating women. So there's kind of this vigilante aspect. That's the I'll smile more when you're dead, right? And it emerges in the book, that this particular ability, and you can see I'm dabbling a little bit in magical realism a bit with this book, that some of these abilities have emerged from their history of trauma that they have, that they share. And so that led me to looking into more of the science of how does trauma impact our bodies? How does it impact our brains? Specifically. And then also looking at epigenetics, how the environment can turn certain genes on or off depending on your experiences, especially your early experiences, and how that can set you up for more healthy development or for more chronic developmental issues. Um, and it's really been fascinating for me, especially because when I was training 20 plus years ago, it was so much focus on our genes, our genes. And nowadays we know that our genes they don't change, but the expression of them changes based on early stress and trauma.
It's
So that would be my very long-winded, winding answer to a complex question that I'm going to have to give some more thought to, but that's what occurs to me initially.
So I've been hearing a lot of talk out in the stratosphere, whatever, universe, whatever, about generational
Mhm.
trauma. Is that kind of what you're talking about when you're saying about our genes?
Yeah, so in generational trauma, we think about it as how stress impacts the body at a cellular level, um, and it leads to a lot of chronic health issues. And
Mm.
so when you look at certain populations of individuals who are encountering more systemic stress, it affects their physical bodies. And what's thought, and my understanding of the literature is that it's not completely confirmatory yet, but the stress that, say, um, uh, let's just talk about it kind of like in the matrilineal line, that the stress that a mother experiences in her life, when she then gives birth to a child, that child's genetics is likely also going to have certain epigenetic markers, certain genes turned on or off that are related to the stress that the mother experienced in her life. Now, there's some confounding factors here. I don't mean to get all professorial on you because it's complicated, right? Because there's also certain elements where it's hard to separate, um, especially in a matrilineal line, because when we are as a fetus, we already have our eggs that are ready then for the next generation. So it's
Mhm.
hard to know if it's because of the stress that we were experiencing in utero, or if it's because of the generational trauma being carried epigenetically. But what our parents go through impacts what we go through. Um, and when you look at certain really significantly studied traumas. Like if you look at Holocaust survivors, if you look at descendants of enslaved people, if you look at individuals who went through serious famine, you do see these generational traumatic links where the next generation and the next generation have certain markers that make them more likely to have certain health and mental health issues. And that seems to be the generational trauma.
Mhm. That is honestly fascinating, and I didn't mean to take us down that track. I was just
I
curious
couldn't
about
help myself, Dawn.
epi-
I've been so fascinated with this piece of our field, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. If you would go down and look at my bookshelf, I have like 7 books I checked out from the library this summer, and every single spine says something about epigenetics.
Yeah, I wrote it down, epigenetic, because I thought that is like very interesting. So we do have a question in the chat, and this goes back to you being a teacher, but how do your students and colleagues respond to your novels? Are they surprised, concerned, supportive, etc.?
Okay, so first question with that. My students are amazing human beings and they are incredibly supportive of me as I try to be of them. So I get a lot of sweet messages from students saying, "Oh, I read your book and I loved it," or so they're very encouraging of it. And a lot of my students are also creative writers, and so they like to talk about that process. And so it's a very wonderful, supportive relationship. I see the second question there. How much of what you write is sparked by questions or people you encounter in your classes or your research? Okay, so I kind of already answered this. Like a lot of what I study is, it shows up in my books. You'll see different references and things like that. So, uh, when we're thinking about different characters, I'm going to steal the line from my beloved P.D. James, the wonderful mystery writer. She's now passed away, but oh, she got me into the mystery and thriller genre reading her books. And she's like, my characters include everyone and no one that I've met, like everyone that I met shows up in my books in little pieces. And I think that's absolutely true. I'm trying to think which book was it. I think It Was Always You. If you read it, there's a little reference. I call her my work wife. She's my beloved colleague and friend. And she used to be my next door office neighbor when I was in my old department. And we have this thing that we would say every semester, there's always a point in the semester where there's just a lot of drama. Students are stressed, a lot of things kind of come out of the woodwork. And she and I would always look at each other. We're like, cue the music, it's happening. It's that point in the semester again. So there's a reference to that in the book between my main character, Morgan, and one of her colleagues. It's like, cue the music. And so it's like these little touchstones, these little Easter eggs of real life. And I'm looking at this. Okay, so I'll get to the final question. Scene or character you're scared yourself by writing. Wow, this got dark.
That's a great question.
I really have trouble killing people in my books. Like, I know it happens. Tanisha's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know. People die in my books all the time. I have trouble writing the death. So if you read my books, there's not a lot of gruesome violence or descriptions of that. Okay, so this is going to be it's not necessarily dark, but in The Good Life, the one that was written later on the pandemic when our lives were we were living the lives of Stoics, all isolated. And it's set in this luxury resort. It maybe got a little racier, a little steamier than I had expected it to. And I just kind of rolled with it. And I was like, Sarah, did you just say that? Oh, okay, we're just going to go with it. And the funny thing is, when that book was published, I brought a few copies to the firehouse. Um, and one of my older firefighter friends, his name's Carmine, he's a retired judge. He started reading it and he came up to me afterwards. He's like, Sarah, this is how he talks. Sarah, I started reading your book. It's a little racy. And I was like, Carmen, I don't know what to tell you. I'm a grown married woman.
And
So there you go.
that's a good point, because people, like when you are writing things, and I know this makes a lot of authors hesitant, knowing that, well, people know I wrote this book, they're going to read this book. And if they hold themselves back out of fear of how it's going to be perceived by people that they know, like,
Yeah.
it can hold you back.
I just don't
Good
I
for
don't let
you.
it. Don't let it. I just go for it. And again, it
Mhm.
comes from this organic place of, am I having fun writing this story? You know, is this going to be a fun story for readers to enjoy? And it all comes back to that. So, and maybe you've gotten a sense in our discussion that, like, I'm not a very shy person. You know, I'd like to live my life authentically. And in part, that's because, I'm in front of my students so often. And that's part of my role as a teacher, I think, is to be vulnerable with them. So I have a lot of practice with it. And so, yeah, I'm like, I just put it all out there. We're all human beings, like we're all connected together. And I think often, being that kind of honest and vulnerable person makes it so much easier than it can really help other people feel
Mhm.
seen, you know?
Yes, yes, agreed. So Linda is asking if you would be willing to share your contact information, which I believe you are
Absolutely.
because your website, I think, has
It does, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
So
in this chat, I'm happy to share my academic
yeah,
email as well. I'm gonna go ahead and put it
okay,
in because that's the one I
yeah.
check most often. Although I check my author one too. And just in case, my real name, my professor name is Sarah Colat. Sarah K. Stevens is a pen name. Stephen was my beloved late father's first name. So
Oh.
that's where Stephen comes from.
Mhm.
And he had passed away before I started publishing my books. So it's my little nod to my wonderful dad. But yeah, I put my email in there, and I by no means am an expert at epigenetics, right? But I am learning, and I would be happy to then, if you have questions about that or early trauma or developmental psychology or anything, if I can't answer it, I'll put you in touch with some of my brilliant colleagues who I'm sure can.
Well, uh, thank you for that author. And Linda
Thank you. Can I say?
is also a scientist, so I'm sure.
Oh, Linda, we have to chat. Email
I would
me,
love to,
okay?
yes.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I can't, I just gather, expert authors like I just can't have enough. I mean, honestly, I love them. They're my favorite.
Linda, what's your area of expertise?
I was data science, artificial intelligence is like, yeah. So
Oh my God. Okay. Well, email me so I can then
okay.
ask you
Oh,
questions.
deal. Deal.
Collaboration. Yeah. Okay, so I hate to say it, but we're coming up on the end of our
I
program
went too
already.
fast on it. Went too
I
fast.
agree. I agree. I want to know about the volunteer firefighting before
Oh my God.
we sign
Okay.
off.
Guys, buckle up because you're going to have to just cut me off at some point. So, in living in central PA, and probably it's not the same in Atlanta because you guys are a bigger metropolitan area, but all across our country, a lot of our fire stations are run by volunteers, which I had no idea until several years ago. I lived in my town. I'm like, oh, the firefighters are paid. And then I realized when my husband suggested that he would like to join, again, when our kids were older and we needed some goals and challenges, he's like, yeah, our fire companies volunteer, Sarah. I think I'd like to join. And so he joined. And our fire company has a wonderful training program. It's very rigorous. We run, as we say, we run with Alpha Fire Company. So you can look them up. We have a great website. I'm going to put that in there too, in case
Yes.
you want to check it out. And that's in State College, PA. We're also on the Instagram if you want to see all the stuff that we get up to. Oh, and I should put my Instagram too.
Yes, please do.
It's all firefighting, dogs, books, gardening, and lately some working out and like being like enjoying my 40-year-old like physical fitness that I've been doing a lot with my firefighting.
Well, I was going to say you have to be physically fit to do this.
Yes, yeah, you
Yeah.
do. And the
Yeah.
thing is like I'm a more petite person. I'm only about 5'4". My husband's 6'3". So obviously we have different skills we bring to the table as firefighters. So anyway, Josh had joined. I decided to then join in the midst of COVID. I needed a new challenge and I needed something to do, and our community really needed more firefighters. And I thought, okay, can I actually do this? And Josh thought I could. And our chiefs and officers thought I could. So I went through the training. And 3 months later, on my 40th birthday, I'm running into a burning building as part of our training. You know, we do a live fire training that you do to kind of graduate from your first class that you do, and you continue training and whatnot. And the thing I love about firefighting is it's very purposeful. I also loved joining Alpha because at that point in the pandemic, I had felt so isolated. I wasn't with my students in the classroom. I wasn't around in my community. And so I still remember being in the fire engine for the first time in really close proximity to other people and collaborating together. And in firefighting, there's a lot of physical touch. There's a lot of, you're doing something and the person behind you has their hand on your shoulder, so they know they're there backing you up. And I just loved that social connection piece. Plus, I get to learn how to like break doors open and like cut a car in half if I have to get somebody out. It's wild, the stuff that I have learned. Um, so the last thing I'll say about firefighting, besides the fact that I've met the most incredible people and friends, if you have the opportunity to go to your fire station, go check them out. Firefighters are wonderful people. Um, the thing I love about it the most is, besides the purposeful work, is that you are always learning something. And it's very much part of my academic life and my writing life. I always want to be getting better, learning something, challenging myself. And that's what firefighting is. There's always more to learn. So I absolutely love it.
And as you said, it's purposeful. And I think that's
Absolutely. And
important.
Linda Foster said her son was a firefighter. Oh my gosh. Wonderful. Was he a career firefighter or a volunteer like me? I don't want to put Linda on the spot, but
Yeah.
anyway, regardless, firefighters are awesome people, and I'm not biased at all. I'm just seriously saying they're wonderful.
So,
Yeah.
as I said, he in UK he was retained. Does that mean he was
That's more like
career?
an official
Yeah.
position. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, cool. Cool, Linda. We learn more about her all the time.
On call.
On call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, as I said, we're getting to the end of our program. And one of the things we always like to ask our authors is to share with us a book that they recommend for us to add to our to be read pile. We have a monthly program open to the public. Everybody is free to join us. It's on the first Saturday of the month. You can get the information on the Sisters in Crime Atlanta website. And it's a gathering of all of us, whether writer or reader, but we gather as readers and we share what we have recently read and our thoughts on it. And we would love for you to join us. But as a segue to that, Sarah, we'd love to know if there's something you've read and recommend.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, like, I felt like I was so prepared for this, and I've been reading a bajillion different books. I have too many to tell you. Okay. So, I'll tell you one book I recently read that I thought was stunning, and it's from a well-known thriller author. So, Paula Hawkins, she's best known for The Girl on the Train, but her most recent book is called The Blue Hour. It is set on a remote island in the UK. And her writing is just so elegant, but also there's this deep mystery at the heart of it. And I have a book I read when I'm running on the treadmill in the morning, and I have a different book I read on my Kindle at bedtime. And The Blue Hour was my bedtime book. And I would just settle into bed and I'd open it up and I was just transported into these characters. And when you talk about someone writing a book where people have difficulties, but the characters are very human, and you can understand why they do what they did, even if what they did is terrible. That's absolutely it. And plus, the setting is just so, give me an isolated island anywhere, and I will be happy as a reader. So, The Blue Hour by Paula Hawkins, I thought was exquisite.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and we will definitely check that out.
Can I add
Now-
one more book? Can I add one
Oh,
more book?
yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
Give
I'm
us-
a little late to the game on this one, but Attica Locke, I don't know if you know her writing, and she writes more Southern mysteries and thrillers, and she's prolific. And I finally read The Cutting Season by Attica Locke. I'm going to put it here just um, because her name is a little bit more unique spelling. So I don't know, I imagine maybe some of you have heard of her already, but oh my gosh, this woman is so talented. And hers are more, they get a little like if Paula Hawkins is kind of more of this, kind of there's not much of a procedural police element to it. With Attica Locke, there is more of this kind of law enforcement element that I really, really like, and this kind of expertise that she offers. And I don't read a lot of procedurals, but The Cutting Season isn't a procedural, but there is a certain insight into law enforcement procedure that she offers, and also lawyering too, being a lawyer. So Attica Locke, anything that this woman has written is brilliant.
Well, thank you for that. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tanisha because she has something special for us. Tanisha, take it away.
All right. So Sarah was gracious enough to send us a few copies of The Girl in the Fire. So I have those here with me. And because you attended, I'm putting everybody in a drawing to get one of these copies. So I put everybody's name on the wheel. Well, I mean, excluding me and Dawn, I guess, and Sarah, of course. And so I'm just going to spin it. And wherever it lands, I figure that's a pretty fair, random way to do it. Wherever it lands, that's who'll get it. And if you're a member, then I'll already have your address, but I'll still reach out just in case maybe the information's not updated or what have you. All right, let's get started. Ready? Oh, wait, I think I forgot Deborah. Wait. Okay, adding. Here we go. So our first winner is Michael Faulkner. All right.
Congrats, Michael. Welcome to my crazy story. I hope you love it.
Good deal. Okay. Next, so take him off. And second book is going to Linda Whitaker. She had to hop off, but that's fine. We'll get her book. And last book we have available goes to, this is fun to watch, Deborah, who I just added. So that was good.
Deborah!
That's hilarious. Okay, good deal. All right, so I'll reach out to y'all to get confirm your information, and I will ship these out as soon as I can.
I never
Thank
win
you.
anything. It's awesome.
Awesome. I'm sure you all know, anytime you read for any author, but especially independent authors, if you enjoy the book, a review on Goodreads and on Amazon is a huge, huge help. So thank you so much in advance just for doing that for all the authors that you enjoy.
Well, I hope that this is successful for our audience. This will also be on our YouTube channel. So anyone that wasn't able to chime in and join us today is still going to be able to have access to it. And our goal, as we always say, is to get our authors' books off the shelf and in the hands of readers. So hoping, I can tell you, I am certainly more intrigued than ever about adding your entire catalog to my to be read list.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. Tanisha, are there any chapter announcements you want to make before we sign off?
Join us at our next membership meeting. Oh, and then Murder by the Book. So first Saturday. So yeah, that's next Saturday at 10 a.m. So we can do our book sharing thing. And again, Sarah, you're welcome to come. And that's all we do is talk about, hey, I've been reading X, Y, and Z. And it's just, I get so many great book recs out of that meeting. It's nuts. It's crazy.
That's awesome. Oh, I love it. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a pleasure. As you can tell, I just love talking with fellow readers and writers, and I appreciate the opportunity so much.
Thank
Again, thank you for joining us.
you.
All right, everybody, take care. Enjoy your Saturdays.
Thank you, you
Thank
too.
Bye.
Right. Lance, if you
Yes.
will. Okay. Close out the recording.